Thunderbolts, Superman, and Fantastic Four. In 2025, we finally had three superhero movies that were actually well received, after a long drought. But why? Why, after all this time, did we finally get good hero films again? And what's the real big difference between these three movies and the superhero films they were dumping on us in recent years? Look, I know there are already hundreds of videos pointing out the problems with the liberal woke hero films of recent years. Let's try to simplify things and boil it down into three central points. But I want to begin by reminding us of something essential and that most people don't even think about it: stories. What are they really for? What role do they play in human life? And why is it that we like and even need them so much? Master storyteller Robert McKee gives us a simple yet incredibly useful explanation. Quoting Kenneth Burke's phrase that stories are equipment for living, in his book Storynomics, McKee explains that storytelling is something instinctive and inherent to the human being, going all the way back to the caves. Think about your own life: 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 12 months a year. How could all those events, all that noise of reality, possibly be processed and understood by the human mind? Only by making cuts, by selecting fragments of reality. And this act of cutting is the essential ingredient of storytelling. We carve out pieces of reality, and from them, we create stories about our own lives. In doing so, we shape our worldview. Without even realizing it, we tell ourselves stories to process and make sense of reality, and it's through these stories that we learn about the world, guide our actions, and find meaning in life. In other words, stories are born out of reality. They exist to interpret the vastness of reality, serving us, as already quoted, as equipment for living, tools that help us live better. Once we understand this, we can clearly see that the recent woke superhero films stopped trying altogether. They denied reality and instead tried to push political propaganda built on utopian ideals. The first point where this denial of reality becomes obvious is in the way male characters are consistently portrayed as weak, while female characters are presented with super physical strength. As political messaging, these women are flawless, without any weakness, and always stronger than every man, who exist only to get beaten down. We can see this clearly with Rey in Star Wars. Portrayed as very powerful and special for no real reason, she doesn't need training to use the lightsaber, and doesn't need to struggle to use the Force. She simply appears out of nowhere, invincible, and beats the bad guy with years of training. Obviously, the audience fails to connect with this kind of character, because as we've already said, it just isn't real. Now, compare that with Hayao Miyazaki's characters, for example, in Spirited Away. Chihiro is weak, small, light, fragile, and she has to work, fight, and struggle hard to achieve anything, in an overwhelmingly loved film. The second reason is pure and simple lack of technical skill, bad writing. Seeing themselves as superior just because I'm a liberal Democrat, the people making these films are essentially trying to tell you, hey, your values are wrong. So sit down and listen to the truth. Here's what you should think. And of course, this materializes on screen in those dreadful lesson of the day moments, long, boring, preachy speeches that pull you completely out of the movie.
The only power I have is that I believe we can do better.
Now, of course, having a big speech in a movie doesn't automatically make it bad. Just look at good examples like A Few Good Men, or the classic Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. The problem is when it's poorly executed, technically weak and solely intended to impose a political vision, turning the film into bad propaganda, instead of a storytelling tool. The third reason is the lack of creativity. Instead of creating new characters to embody their values and worldview, they feel the need to hijack traditional characters and update them to fit a supposed modern, idealized world. In doing so, they not only try to destroy the legacy of beloved characters from the past, but also condemn future, in what some have already called postmodern parasitism. In other words, what we've had on one side is nothing but a vomit of utopian political propaganda, films stripped of true heroism and completely disconnected from reality. Stories that forget what storytelling even is, and what role it plays in our lives. But, now, instead of super strong Captain Marvel, never needing anyone's help, the most powerful being in the entire Marvel universe just because she's a super cool woman and yet so flat and boring we can't even sympathize with her. Now we have Superman, that is indeed the strongest of all heroes, yes, but at every moment desperately trying to be human. He is weak, vulnerable, takes a beating again and again, and is a symbol of hope that shows us what really means to be a hero. Now, instead of a fake badass girl group like the Marvels, now we have a family. A real family, and an effort to be faithful to the essence of these characters, just in Superman, as in the new Fantastic Four, that is portrayed as what they always were in the comics, a family of explorers, with a traditional story that revolves around what a family does by its very essence, generating life, defending life, and standing against force that tries to consume life. And finally, now, we see anti-heroes trying to escape their own depression, daring to have hope and believing that it's possible to fight darkness together, and achieving the light at the end of the tunnel, freely choosing a life of service in pursuit of noble values, as protecting ordinary people through their self-sacrifice. In other words, these three films are superhero films that return to what superhero stories are meant to be. Instead of dumping political agenda on us, they remind us of what a hero truly is. This doesn't even mean that the three movies are perfect, and an artist telling a good story might even try to pose a political message, as James Gunn himself said he tried to do in his Superman. But here's the difference, now the focus seems to be back where it belongs, on telling a good superhero story. That's what I saw. But what about you? What do you think? Does this make sense to you? What do you think these three films really have in common, and why do you think they worked? Tell me everything in the comments below. Please share this video, and I see you in the next time.